Hello, I'm Tull from the Irish Politics newsletter, and I'm here with Vince Martin from Wall Street and Maine. And what we were going to do was talk about our highlights and lowlights from the political year of 2025 in the United States and Ireland. But Vince, there wasn't many highlights, so I think we're just going to have to pick out the moments of the year, are we?
We'll see if we can find some slivers of positivity in there, but as is often the case, unfortunately, in the political world, it's probably going to slant a little negative.
It wasn't a great year for politics in the United States or for Ireland. Ireland, at the start of the year, we were meant to form a government at the very start of the year. We were meant to start the new year with a new government, a new impetus, new energy, and that didn't happen in Ireland. There was a row for maybe 2 or 3 months that rumbled on over speaking rights and who was backing the government and who wasn't backing the government. And it was actually March before we managed to elect a government. And one of the seediest coalition deals was done with Mike Lowry, a politician that was found to be involved in all manner of terrible things regarding corruption and that kind of stuff. He was seen as the kingmaker in Irish politics, and at one stage he was front and centre, and it made an awful lot of people in the establishment very, very uncomfortable in regards to doing a deal with him. He's really a bet in noir in Irish politics, and anybody's like a Fastian pact with the devil shaking his hand to do a deal with him. That was the start of the year for us.
It's kind of funny that your first lowlight is the fact that you guys couldn't put together a government. One of our big lowlights is that we had a government, but it just decided to shut down for 7 weeks. So.
But your shutdown happens every year. Will there be a shutdown this year?
Who knows? We'll see. They are kind of picking up frequencies. Something that was quite rare is becoming quite common.
My reading of this is the US federal government shuts down now is as regular as Thanksgiving or Christmas Day. But so when we get out of Christmas Day, this is when everybody starts talking about the government shutdown. You have op-ed pieces and Vanity Fair and the New York Times about, how people working in government parks and stuff like that, or any kind of federal government, won't get paid for months or weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of it goes until people can't stand it anymore, basically, and then somebody cries uncle, and we all get on with our lives and kind of forget it ever happened.
Until the following year.
Yeah, until the next time.
You're always trying to get on top of your debt, aren't you? Reduce government debt.
Well, that's what a lot of people say is quite important. The lesson we learned from the most recent Trump bill and from this shutdown is that not only do politicians not really want to reduce the deficit, but the American people aren't real thrilled about that idea either. If you tell people, we need to balance the budget, they say, yes, yes, yes. And then when you actually tell them, okay, well, that means we're going to cut this program and we're going to means test Social Security and we do all that. And they go, no, I don't like that. That's terrible. I don't think it's unique to the American people. We want a lot more stuff than we want to pay for. And part of what the shutdown is basically both sides at the end of the day want to do that and serve their constituents' desires. And it basically becomes who can most effectively blame the other side for either threatening the programs or for spending too much money.
And what kind of programs are we talking here? We're talking about building bridges or building roads for the most part, aren't we? They're like infrastructure projects and that, aren't they?
Our deficit's running, close to $2 trillion a year on a $7 trillion budget. So if you're going to cut that, you have to do really substantial things. And we'll talk a lowlight a little later about that issue. But one of the big problems is there's not just like an easy $2 trillion. If you're going to cut that, you're going to cut safety net programs for the most vulnerable people. So food stamps become an issue, which are means tested. About 1 in 8 Americans are on food stamps, which provide support for buying groceries and things like that. For the poorest people, we do need pretty vast infrastructure spending to repair roads and bridges. Our defense budget is now nearing $1 trillion, but nobody really ever wants to cut that.
Is that true that there is a military-industrial complex that holds the government of the United States by the neck? Is that true?
This is kind of, if you lived through 1990s American politics, this is a Bill Clinton answer, because I think it depends on how you define military-industrial complex. But at the end of the day, the idea that, our defense budget would be, $200 billion instead of $900 billion if only these massive companies didn't have armies of lobbyists. No, it's a very difficult thing to actually cut defense spending just because the political risk for any given representative is so high. You cut defense spending and then something goes wrong and your opponent says, oh, look, this guy stopped spending money to keep us safe. And here we are. It's a factor.
It's not as bad as people make it out to be, is it?
No, and that line comes from the last speech Eisenhower gave in early 1961.
Oh, that's right. He warned the military-industrial complex. That's very true.
And so that does occasionally get tied to conspiracies around the Kennedy assassination, things like that. Kennedy didn't want to go into Vietnam, so the contractors had him killed because he was threatening their profits. You can really go down a very, very deep rabbit hole with the term military-industrial complex. I think the reality, as is often the case, is a lot more mundane.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to away from conspiracy theories, because even though we're not a conspiracy theory podcast, that doesn't mean we don't like them. Another low light is the housing situation in Ireland. We cannot get on top of it. Anything we do seems to make everything worse. Micheál Martin and Simon Harris had warned the respective parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, that some tough decisions are going to be made on housing that had to be made. They tried to appoint a housing czar, a fella called MacDonagh, who was to be the point man on fixing Ireland's housing crisis. And it backfired spectacularly when the government were looking to pay him €400,000 a year. So as you can imagine, that's the price of a family home in most areas around, well, maybe not in Dublin, but just on the commuter belts around Dublin, that'd be the average house price. They're paying that every year. And as you can imagine, that made a lot of people very uncomfortable.
Yeah, the optics of that, that's why I'm laughing. The optics are just so obviously terrible to pay a huge salary to a guy who's supposed to be working towards affordability.
It was a car crash from day one, and eventually he had to step down and go, I don't want a job, and there had to be a face-saving exercise. But housing overall in this country is such a dire situation. I have no idea how we're going to fix it. We're going to have to do something on the judicial side to get legislation over the line to stop any Tom, Dick and Harry objecting to housing. See you're building a house in West Cork, Vince. I know you've always wanted to move there.
Yeah, I am all this.
And I'm in Dublin, and I have an animus against you. I'm annoyed with you, whatever. We fell out. And I can object to your property being built, even though I'm living 400 miles away.
Okay.
That's not right.
Now, what is the practical effect of that objection? Is it just that it slows me down, or is there
it'll slow you down? You have to go back to lawyers, back to architects,
right?
Back to the local planning system on the local council, the county council, the local authority. And our planning laws they're just dumb. They're dumb by any international standard, and that's a fact. It's something that's so frustrating. What about you? Is there anything similar going on in the States? Is there any kind of a massive hold-ups in government in the United States holding the country back?
We have a few lowlights, and I think I'll start with the biggest lowlight in government for me this year is DOGE, DOGE,
yes.
The Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah. When Elon Musk was running around the Oval Room with a chainsaw or something, was he?
Essentially, yeah. This is Elon Musk leads this project, this agency that starts at the beginning of the Trump administration. The one highlight I think you can say is the name, because Doge is a reference to a cryptocurrency called Dogecoin, which was created literally as a parody of the stupidity of cryptocurrency. It's a picture of a dog. It has no utility. It has no system. And of course, in the way that crypto works, instead of becoming a parody, it became a paragon of the stupidity. Elon Musk has often had fun with it on social media. You can actually buy a Tesla with Dogecoin.
I did. I saw it. Will I tell you my Doge story, shall I?
Sure.
During COVID, out of boredom, I got into looking at the cryptocurrency, and I downloaded the Binance app, the guy that was pardoned by Trump.
Yep, Trump.
And I bought about $100 worth of Doge, and I'd forgotten all about it. And about 12 months later, I went back, and it was worth nearly €1,000. It had gained €900 in value while I'd forgotten about it.
That really highlights the utility that Dogecoin provides to the world as a whole. You just forget about it and make 900%.
Yeah, I said it to the wife. She was like, hey, cash that out now. I need to go shopping. Okay, all right. So anyway, that's my Doge story. Go on, back to the White House.
Elon has at some point became a fan of it. So that's why he creates this acronym as kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the crypto. But a cryptocurrency designed to highlight stupidity is a perfect name for Doge, which is just stupidity. I mean, just all the way down. And Musk is just a fascinating human being. And it's worth pointing out up front that he has a preternatural, incredible, pretty much unprecedented ability to build companies. I mean, it is spectacular what he has done with Tesla and SpaceX and Starlink and now XAI. And what's really fascinating is that these are companies that do basically what other companies have failed pretty spectacularly to do. He's not inventing new things. The electric car was, first created in the 19th century. He just seems to have this unbelievable ability to bring people together and inspire them. But it's also worth noting that Elon Musk is a liar. And I'll use that term advisedly and with some risk in the U.S. That's a loaded term, even legally, but it's the case. And I know Elon's popularity has plummeted in Europe. You pointed that out, I think, on Substack just a few days ago, right? How far Tesla sales are down.
They're down all over Europe. I mean, some places they're down as 40, 50% in some countries.
Now, the reaction in Europe, that's just the political, him siding with Trump, is that some of the anti-Semitic landmines he has kind of tweeted himself into. What's driving the change in his perception, do you think?
Ketamine, probably. Lots of ketamine.
That's the root cause, yeah.
Well, I mean, the White House Chief of Staff did a wide-ranging interview with the Vanity Fair, was it? That was a big deal in the States.
Susie Wiles. Yep.
Yeah, and she just basically said Trump behaves like an alcoholic and Elon Musk is weirder than everybody thinks.
Yeah, Trump has an alcoholic's personality was one of the headline quotes.
Yeah.
To Trump's credit, he came out and said, yeah, she's not wrong.
But bizarrely enough, I mean, what kind of hold does she have on him that he came out and said that? Normally he slaps these people down pretty quickly, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he on occasion shows some self-awareness with things like that. And the other thing too, I mean, I'm not sure, listeners know that, but it is a funny phrase from Wiles because Trump is a teetotaler. Do Irish people know that
drink,
term?
Yes. Yeah, he's a teetotaler. We have a few of them in Ireland. Not many, but there's a few knocking around the place.
I wanted to ask if Irish people knew the term or if they understood the concept.
Well, we do. I'm prone to teetotaling the odd time myself. And going back to Elon Musk there slightly, sorry. I'm looking there and his car sales in France are down 63%, Spain 75%, Norway, Sweden, where that was his biggest market for the last 10 years. They're down 50%.
Yeah, that was really one that catalyzed them moving up to the top of the ranks, definitely.
Yeah, Germany 60%. So Musk's political musings have a tendency to get him and his businesses into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you see that in the States now on Tesla cars. People put bumper stickers that say things like "bought this before Elon became a Nazi." And the great irony here is Teslas until probably 2019 were kind of a democratic status symbol. There was a little bit of virtue signaling to that, that you bought that because you believed in climate change and wanted to fight it and things like that. His politics have really created a problem for the company in the near term. The reason I asked about his perception is I am curious to what extent the broader public realizes that his pattern of exaggerating, to put it mildly, goes back, essentially since Tesla became a public company, which happened in 2010. He has a long history of what you could, at the very least, call broken promises. One of the famous ones is that he tweeted that within 2 years, you would be able to summon. So you go on your app and hit a button that tells a Tesla to drive to you. And he tweeted that within 2 years, you'd be able to summon a Tesla from Los Angeles to New York.
And that hasn't happened, yes.
No, because it has not happened, and he tweeted that in 2016. And his supporters will say, look, he overpromises, he's optimistic. This is kind of what's required to drive this kind of innovation. But he's been doing it for so long and the lives are so big that there's a line between overly optimistic and just dishonest. If I tell my wife I'm going to fix the fence this weekend and I don't get it done, I was optimistic. If I told her I'm going to build the fence this afternoon, I'm just lying. And he has kind of done that again this year. In April, he said that the robots they're developing, they'd have thousands of those robots in their factories by the end of 2025. There's nothing. Yeah.
He also said he'd reduce bots on X. So, yeah, his history of gaffes and lies and, very questionable behavior. So,
and he tries to apply this to the government before Trump takes office. Musk says, that he thinks that they can cut $2 trillion from the budget. He has no apparent reason for picking that number. It's just a big number. Cuts that down to $1 trillion. And then when they get into office, they have this calculator online. You can still look it up. And as of right now, they're saying that they've saved $210 billion. So even that's 10% of what he originally said. And even that figure, most experts who look at it in kind of a neutral manner go, it's massively inflated. They cut contracts that were already going to expire and claim that as savings and things like that. The bigger issue, again, the name, the stupidity of the DOGE name, it's just stupidity all the way down. They laid off 350 people who manage nuclear security here. One team they fired and they had to immediately rehire within days because DOGE just kind of went through some spreadsheet and just hacked them all. The foreign aid thing, I think, is one of the most shameful things we've done this century. And I know a lot of listeners will think that that's a very high bar for America to clear. The defenders of DOGE, of Musk, of Trump would say, look, it's not America's job to fund, humanitarian programs in Africa. And they would also point, and with some evidence, that some of our money got wasted. But this is the real world. Spending American money on, aid in developing countries is probably a smart thing from a soft power. Exactly.
Who's taken over from funding these programs?
It's China, of course.
China, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, incidentally, one of the largest holders of U.S. foreign debt. They're a huge owner.
I think just from a practical standpoint, saying this money is wasted, I think that's silly, particularly when you're still a decade out from the end of a pretty disastrous series of wars in the Middle East. Dropping food that says made in America, is probably a good idea after you unfortunately dropped quite a few bombs that say made in America. All right. So if you don't want to go with the soft power route, if you think that that's fine, we're going to retrench as the Trump administration seems to want to do. We don't really care about influence as much. Well, programs like PEPFAR, which provide HIV and AIDS treatment in Africa, that's probably a good idea 5 years after a global pandemic. Like spending money to say, sense. Okay, we're going to try and stop viruses from circulating. Yeah, raise my taxes to pay for that, please. That's a good plan. And then if you say, well, it's not our job, that's what Secretary of State Rubio has said recently. Why are we doing it? Why isn't UK doing it? Why isn't China doing it? Whatever. Okay. You don't really care about the moral thing. Don't do what they did and just end this stuff in a matter of weeks. You're going to say, well, these people need to handle it themselves. Private charity needs to get involved. Then give them time to do that. They just cut programs that were literally saving people's lives with no notice, no plan, no structure. Again, I think a lot of listeners will have a lot to criticize with U.S. policy overseas this century. I think this is the worst thing we've done. I really do. I think it is so dumb. It is so amoral. It is so dumb. It is so counterproductive. And it doesn't matter. We have this idea that international aid is why we have a budget deficit. It's not even 1% of the budget.
No, it's not. And since they cut the budget, AIDS infections are up, tuberculosis is up, and child deaths from other causes, I'm presuming measles, mumps, rubella, any kind of those
massive outbreaks of cholera, which can be treated very simply and very, very quick, very cheaply. Yeah, it's really a disastrous thing. And to me, the idea that, people can go, I hate Elon Musk because he retweeted some anti-Semite. Like, I get that. But, to me personally, his success is real, but this is it's a huge black mark for him personally, and I think for us.
Yeah, they're talking about 1 million lives a year, thereabouts, lost. I don't know how they quantify that, to be perfectly honest, but I see NPR, National Public Radio in the United States, had a figure as high as 14 million. It's they're wild numbers. They're hard to get your head to comprehend, to get your head around it, So.
Yeah, I think you do probably have to take those numbers with a shaker of salt, but it's thousands. If you look at the scope and scale of these programs and hear some of the stories about how people were operating a program on Monday and just got a message on Wednesday that you're done.
And that's a direct consequence of Elon Musk, bad egg, bad at politics, shouldn't be left anywhere kind of power. But let's get back to, there was one highlight in Irish politics this year, and that was for the left wing, and that's the election of Catherine Connolly. We covered that quite in depth on episode 2 of the podcast, where we did a presidential post-mortem on it. And, you know, it was a good election for Catherine Connolly, bad election for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. Catherine Connolly, of course, she is not like Donald Trump in any way or whatsoever. She's nothing like him at all. Let me get that straight. But she did campaign in a manner very similar to him in not, you know, answering questions. She just ignored the media. It served her well. She romped home with a record win. It was a good win for the left-wing parties in Irish politics. But that coalition of left is now dissolving, as we spoke about quite in depth. There was no real major elections in the United States. There was some midterm elections, was there?
Not even midterms, what you call off year. The big news that, you know, was basically a Democrat sweep. Zoran Mamdani winning the election to become mayor of New York City was the most widely covered. Democrats also won governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. I'm a little skeptical, as you said, about the Connolly election. I think people applying broader impact to it and suggesting that it's a signal of a huge trend are possibly overstating the case. We didn't have big elections, but one thing I would put on this list that you have to, and it's up to listeners whether it's a highlight or a low light, but you have to put January 20th, 2025 on the list. Trump's inauguration day. Not only gives his speech, he signed 26 executive orders the first day, one of them infamously pardoning all the rioters convicted of offenses regarding January 6th. It is a massively consequential day. I think it's the most consequential day in American politics since September 11th. It is the beginning of a clear effort in this term for Trump to become a transformative president, basically the right's version of Franklin D. Roosevelt, in that whether you love him or hate him, you cannot deny that he is consequential.
And like FDR, he'd like to have 4 terms in office, wouldn't he?
Yeah, really. He keeps teasing 3, but who knows with him? You might well be right there.
But he constitutionally can't do anything, can he? I mean, he is in a bind. There's nothing he can do, is there?
Oh, I mean, it seems clear cut that he can't, but the American judicial system, including the Supreme Court, on occasion has found things in the Constitution that are not apparent in a layman's read. And there are some scholars who are saying that, you know, that there's a way for him to do that. There's also these weird gambits he supposedly could do where if they ran a Vance-Trump ticket,
he could be vice president and then become
he would
president.
be elected as vice president, and then Vance would step down. This
is all a reading of something some guys wrote 300 years ago, and they're trying to interpret it in modern terms. It's not something that seems constitutionally relevant, even what some guys were thinking 300 years ago when they were drawing up the American Constitution. It's a document for 300 years ago, so it's not a document for today.
Well, there goes your U.S. visa, like we talked about.
Yeah, well, I don't think that was happening anytime soon. Anyway, I'm on some Trump list, anti-Trump list somewhere. Anyway, that's for sure. Moving us back to Irish politics, Paschal Donohoe departed for the World Bank in Washington, and he's left a massive hole in Irish politics. Some felt he was the Minister for Finance for 14 years, or Minister for Expenditure, one of the two. His departure has left a big hole in Fine Gael, and Simon Harris has stepped up to become Minister for Finance and the Taoiseach also. And a lot of people don't think it's a good idea. People were polled recently, and somewhere around 70% of people said it was a bad idea. So Simon Harris, as leader of Fine Gael, has a lot on his plate at the moment, and it has to be seen whether he's going to be sensible Simon and, you know, put money away for a rainy day in case a massive recession hits us, or is he going to have a massive giveaway budget and give people back their hard-earned tax money and that kind of stuff, you know? That's a big change at the top of Irish politics to happen in Fine Gael.
This is basically kind of the classic conflict between having a politician and having a civil servant in a role like that. Is that kind of what's going on here? You're worried that political considerations wind up trumping practical responsibility.
You know, he's going to under fierce pressure within his own party, because how this works essentially is that he's going to have different ministers come to him with the begging bowl, asking for X, Y, and Z, and he's going to have to say no to them, right? So, you say, I want £100 million for a playground in Carlow or whatever the case may be. He's going to have to say no, okay? And every time he says no, you know, his popularity gets chipped away within the political party that he governs.
Yeah, somebody else needs to be the bad guy, right?
Yeah, somebody else needs a bad. You have good cop, you bad cop. This is the way it's worked for 100 years in politics. You go back, to the Middle Ages, and people are blaming
I'm sure
other people, whoever their chief finance minister is. Back in the day, they chopped their heads off when they were unpopular. These days, they have to slink off quietly. But Simon Harris taking on the dual role of Vice Prime Minister, Taoiseach, and Minister for Finance, I think it's a big ask. It's a big, big ask.
Yeah, that does sound like, again, from the outside, that sounds like a potential minefield. I imagine having J.D. Vance as Secretary of the Treasury in the United States might raise some eyebrows and some concerns.
We also had Pierce Doherty confused a very large Irish company called Musgrave SuperValue, and he confused them.
This was a fun one. Yeah, I very much enjoyed this story.
Yeah,
on the lighter side of Lowlights, I think.
Yeah, this is on the Dáil Éireann, the Irish Parliament, the equivalent to your Houses of Congress, and that it's the pressing issues of our time are debated with all the precision of a blindfolded man swinging a sledgehammer in a china shop. he essentially used ChatGPT, right? And he put in SuperValue, and they came back with an American company and all their financial statements. SuperValue in the United States are owned by a company called United Natural Foods.
I think UNFI bought them. It was for $3 billion. So they're not like a 6 grocery store chain out in Nebraska somewhere. They're a sizable organization. Adding to the confusion, they're both spelled the same way. They're SuperValue with no E at the end.
Pierce Doherty got up in the Dáil and he thundered about how their profits were up 60%.
And their stock price had taken off.
He was talking about their share price going through the roof. They're profiting off the misery of Irish people. And it's just that, they're not an Irish company. You put in.
It's a completely different company.
SuperValue in Ireland's not listed on any stock exchange. They're owned by Musgraves, who are not listed on any stock exchange. It was very embarrassing. He got caught using ChatGPT, and it was a rookie error. I'm sure the person who wrote the speech for him and put all the stats and figures into the speech for him got a proper talking down to, got the hairdryer treatment probably.
It's a funny thing that to confuse two companies. That issue is kind of funny that issue exists in Ireland, because we've had that here in the U.S. too. Mamdani, as part of his mayoral campaign in New York, he actually pledged to open government-run grocery stores because he said that they were taking too much money.
It's just-in-time business.
It's a massively complex business, and I mean, it's easy to forget what that industry pulled off in the U.S. and in Europe during the novel coronavirus pandemic. I think they actually didn't get enough credit. There are a lot of ways that industry could have wound up with serious food shortages, not, we can't find disinfectant.
Yeah, people stockpiling toilet roll to manage to
get, we had that too, yeah.
So, I mean, the funny thing about SuperValue here in Ireland, that part of the Musgrave group, was that when Pierce Doherty got up to speak in the Dáil that time, he actually didn't realise the Musgraves are the biggest employer in his county. They support something like, 30,000 Irish jobs directly or indirectly, something like that. It's a wild number. So, I mean, I don't have much in the way of highlights, not even remotely. I mean, we had the unfortunate incident with Zelensky's drones recently, and which was incredibly embarrassing for the country on lots of different levels, because quite simply, we're not able to defend ourselves. And that's what it comes down to. We're relying on the French and the British to defend our airspace and patrol our seas when the Russians start to get a bit shifty. And the policy around defence and neutrality is a serious, serious problem, because we cannot defend ourselves. Be a neutral country by all means. But if you cannot defend yourself, then you are not a neutral country.
Right.
By any measure of statehood, by any measure of neutrality, being an independent sovereign country, you have to be able to defend yourself, or at least deter people from playing nasty with you. So that's a big low. That's been a big low for me.
One low light, which is going to be February 27th of this year. Now, Tull, we have not talked too much about this yet, but so I'm going to start with the question. Right now, are the Epstein files widely known, widely discussed in Ireland? If I'm in a pub in Clonakilty and I start talking about the Epstein files, is the average Irish drinker going to know what I'm talking about?
They're going to have an idea, yeah. You can't escape it. It's all over the place.
A year ago, would that have been true?
No, not in Clonakilty anyway, no, not in West Cork.
Okay, now the reason I bring that up is that same shift has happened in America. Everybody in America right now knows about the Epstein files. A year ago, They really didn't. It was not a mainstream issue. It was not a big part of the 2024 campaign. It was not a part of the 2016 campaign. It has been a huge shift. It has obviously become a hugely politically important shift because we are having hearings in Congress over this issue. It's dominating news cycles from time to time. And a big reason that shift happened is because of what the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, did on February 27th, which I am going to go out on a limb and say is the dumbest thing I have ever seen a cabinet member do in my adult life. And I'm really curious as to your opinion on this because you have history with politics and with divisive issues. And I kind of want to set the tone here. So Bondi takes office. She knows that this is a big issue with the online right, which is a big part of Trump's base. She knows this in part because Kash Patel, who is going to take over the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he was a podcaster who talked about the Epstein files and how they needed to come out. His deputy said that. J.D. Vance has said that. So they know that the base wants blood, which in this case might actually not be a metaphor. And so they know that when she starts, and they know a month later what they have, what documents they have, what's in the files. If there's any proof to these online conspiracies, all the stuff, Bill Clinton flew to the island and he was having sex with 14-year-olds and Epstein had video and he was blackmailing them and all these theories that go off in all different ways. So correct me here if you think I'm wrong. In that situation, you kind of it seems like you have two paths. Right. If you don't have the information, if the base is wrong, if all these conspiracy theories are overwrought, you can go to your base and just say, we're looking, we have the files, there's nothing here, we're going to give you what we can, it'll be redacted, and that's it. Or you can really just try and manage this, right? You can just no oxygen to the issue. If anybody asks, you kind of, you throw some tidbits, you throw your number 3 guy on a podcast and say, oh, we're working on it. And you just kick the can down the road. Does that seem like kind of your reasonable two paths? Conspiracies aside, this is not an uncommon issue that the base of a party in power wants something that the party, in this case, just can't deliver.
Yeah, look, we spoke about, particularly in the United States, that political parties are largely coalitions within themselves.
Right.
It's a little bit different in Ireland. But you had a lot of Trump's base and people in the Republican Party now. So you had the QAnon people supported Trump, okay?
QAnon, if you're not familiar, is a kind of wide-ranging online conspiracy that alleges in its various versions that elites are sex trafficking and
but it turns out
pedophiles. And
it turns out they were kind of partially correct, right? QAnon, it turns out QAnon actually might have been kind of correct. Oh my God! I mean,
see, I don't know. I don't think that's the case at all. I think
I think the theory behind it was correct in that some elites, were engaged in from very bad behavior. Essentially, you don't think so? No, you don't think so?
And I think that gets to why this is such a lowlight. Bondi has brought that idea into the mainstream, even though what they have said over and over again on multiple times is actually, no, this is not what was going on. The idea that the elites, plural, are doing this stuff is kind of based on the idea that there is this evidence in these files, that there is this client list. And part of the reason people believe there's a client list is that twice during February, Bondi said that it was literally on her desk.
Yes.
She came out and said, oh, no, well, I didn't mean the list was on my desk. It was just some files.
Do you not think she said the list was on my desk and somebody said, well, there's people in that don't want to be on the list, so bury that, I mean, she spoke out of turn, maybe. I think that's my feeling of there.
I mean, ironically, given what I'm saying, that's the one explanation that I think exonerates her. But even plausible, so, you don't say anything until you have the conversation with that with somebody.
Boss. Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem here is, they're absolutely delusional if they think this is going away. No, this is not going away. You can't put this back in the box as a...
Right.
Even if it turns out to be the biggest... wackiest conspiracy theory of all time, if none of it's true, right? Even if none of this is true, it's not going away.
No, and it's, to your point, the reason it's not going back in the box is that Pam Bondi opened the box, pulled out a pile of and then said to everybody, well, okay, well, there's nothing else left in the box. She tells these interviewers that she has files on her desk. Then she does a big reveal On February 27th, she invites all these online podcasters and YouTubers from the right, all these huge Epstein truthers, to the White House. I had forgotten that, making it even worse, they actually title this Phase 1. So they're, even in the title, they're teasing this idea that there's this massive reveal. They give all these people binders, and the binders, there's just nothing. It's just, It's all documents that are already released. All these people rush to social media and go, this is terrible. They're lying. They're now she's getting accused of being part of the deep state. It is just spectacular political malpractice. And again, if you have something,
they don't control
if you
the
don't
story
have
anymore.
anything, don't hold an event at the freaking White House to tell everybody that you don't have anything. And don't say it's phase 1 of not having anything. I think it's kind of a little bit underrated, particularly with people who are really into politics and who have kind of gotten into this issue. People did not know about this issue. The broader American public kind of knew Epstein was a weird guy. They knew he's a bad guy. Various things pop up in the news cycle when he committed suicide in 2019, or, as some listeners might prefer, I say, in air quotes, committed suicide.
Right, yeah. And even the circumstances around his death were kind of, this doesn't look great, doesn't it? You know, I mean, it's added fuel to the fire.
Yeah, there's the video cameras are turned off and all. But just what she has done politically is just, it's really staggering in its just absolute incoherence and incompetence, to a point that I've actually kind of enjoyed it. But the question I have is, I really, from the jump, I cannot imagine how she thought this was going to go, what the plan was. And they have just turned this little campfire on the internet into an absolute brush fire that is all across mainstream media now.
But you said something there about a plan. I don't think they had a plan.
There's no evidence that they did. But again, she had to have known. And I think one of the great ironies here is there are enough people in the White House who are in that world to know that this was an issue. But one person who I think it's very clear did not know that this was an issue was Donald Trump.
No,
I don't think Trump, and there's a fascinating quote. It's in the New York Times in July. And this is when the story pops back up in the news cycle, and Trump goes on his social media site, which is called Truth Social.
That's
and
right.
He does this post about how he doesn't want the support of anybody who believes in all this Epstein stuff. And he calls his own supporters weaklings, and he just kind of melts down. And the New York Times is covering this. And here's the quote. One person close to Trump conceded that the president didn't grasp how deep and wide the discontent was because he doesn't spend all that much time on the internet where Epstein conspiracies breed, right? The 79-year-old president's media diet consists primarily of cable news and print newspapers. A lot of those leaks are self-serving, but that's one that I actually believe. And if you look at the way he acted in past campaigns, people asked him about the Epstein files. Are you going to release it? And he kind of went, yeah, sure, I guess. But he was not pushing the story. And I think it's true that he himself did not realize that this was a thing. And I think that is really like just the perfect evidence for the fact that this was not a mainstream story a year ago, and it is unquestionably a mainstream story now.
There was a famous quote from years ago about, the only way to end a politician's career was to be found in bed with a dead girl or a live boy.
Yeah, that is a good one.
This has all the machinations of that kind of seediness, I mean, they're not putting this back in the box, right? So I'm seeing on social media at the moment Irish people looking for Irish names on the Epstein files that they weren't looking for 12 months ago.
Wow.
I made a joke. I said I'm surprised nobody from Sinn Féin was on the Epstein list because, it's a party that's had a long history of covering up child abuse. I was surprised at the reaction that a lot of people actually agreed with me, but I said it tongue in cheek. But, like every dark joke, there's an awful lot of truth in it.
Of course, yeah.
And then let me ask you this. Like, Pam Bondi has dropped the ball here, right? If you were Trump, you'd make her the scapegoat for everything that's going on with this, right?
No, You can't.
But you'd try, wouldn't you?
No.
I mean, you can't know. Can she not be impeached for this, by the lawmakers after everything's redacted? So they redacted all these files, yes? But they were meant to be released unredacted.
I'm not a legal expert. It seems to me as a layman that there would be a case for impeaching her legally, politically. That's not... not going to happen. As everybody talks about when we do these impeachments, it's a political action, not a legal action. So the idea that she actually would be impeached, particularly given that Republicans are still in Congress stuff, I think it's pretty unlikely, even though it does seem like they're kind of violating the law here.
Let's engage in some what ifs here for a moment. So Trump is going to need a scapegoat for all this, right? This is what Trump does. He makes scapegoats of people. I think she might be a scapegoat here from.
It's possible, but I'd make 2 points. One, he has done scapegoats, but they have in this term made a very, very clear decision that they don't want turnover.
No.
Because the first term was so chaotic and he did have so many scapegoats and people were getting tossed left, right, and center. There's a famous one with Scaramucci.
Yeah.
Anthony Scaramucci.
How many Scaramucci's did he last?
Yeah,
Yes.
he was the head of communications for 11 days, which has now become a tongue-in-cheek measurement of time. Even something else we could call out as a lowlight, which was when the Secretary of Defense was on a group chat about missile strikes in Yemen.
Oh, yeah.
And they just added a journalist from The Atlantic. The guy who did that, he wasn't fired. He wasn't scapegoated. They took him out of his position, and then they still made him ambassador to the UN.
Those were quite insightful also because it showed what the thinking of what was going on at the heart of the regime, the Trump
administration. It was
administration.
fascinating, yeah.
Because Vance seemed to question what Trump was at in terms of, bombing Yemen. I thought we would be staying out of war, as he said. And, he was questioning Trump's judgment there, essentially. They blamed Europe for freeloading, which was a constant theme. So they all sounded very genuine as opposed to being hoaxes like some people claimed they were.
No, completely genuine. Even Hicks says, he's cheering himself on. And then, of course, very famously says, we're clean on OPSEC, which is operational security.
Clearly
we're
not.
Clean. Hey, did you look at the top of your signal chat and see if there's any journalists on the list in the public view?
A new low for American security anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah. Circling back to Bondi, I think that they are very, very reluctant to have scapegoats. It does seem clear, and there's been some reporting to that end, that they are pretty committed. The number 2 guy, Bongino, who we mentioned before, he's leaving the FBI. Going back to the podcast world, had an interview on Fox News last month, and they asked him about the Epstein files. And they said, basically, you said that there was a massive ring here, and you said you didn't think Epstein committed suicide. Why have you changed your tune? And he literally just highlights the entire right-wing media movement. He says, well, back then it was opinions, but now I'm dealing in facts.
No.
And you're like, well, back then you were supposed to be dealing in facts too.
In other words, I have opinions and I have others that can be bought for as well. That's exactly what's going on.
But so I don't think that they want a scapegoat. But I think the other problem is, again, they're not putting that back in the box. How do you fire anybody? How do you have anybody out of their position without it now just being twisted into it's just all another step in the cover-up? The other problem is, even if it doesn't seem like a cover-up, now you're just raising expectation. So if you fire Bondi, all the influencers are going to go, okay, great. Well, now he's going to put in someone who's going to give us the truth.
The problem there with the conspiracy theory stuff was that it actually looks like a conspiracy theory. I'm like 16 Epstein files, including a photo of Trump, have disappeared from the Department of Justice website.
Yeah, no one knows why.
This is the stuff conspiracy theories are made of. These are the stuff.
We are going to do an episode on this. We have to. But the one thing about the story, I'm very anti-conspiracy theory. I generally believe 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
I agree. I agree completely, yes.
But this story, and you mentioned, that there were questions around his death. The questions around his life start when he's 20 years old. His life in finance is bizarre. He has all these jobs. It just goes on and on and on. I have never seen a story that is just so perfectly calibrated for people who believe in conspiracies and for the structure of online media, for lack of a better term. I mean, and to your point, the story's not going away.
No,
this story is so enticing. It was never, ever going to go away. There's not a conclusion here that's going to satisfy everybody. And circling back to the original point, that's why Bondi screwed up so badly, because there was no ending here where the people online were satisfied. There was just none. And so your only strategy that makes any sense is just keep them segregated, keep them quiet, keep them down, and just run out the clock.
Well, you see, I'm looking at stuff here. I'm looking at the Hill and that'd be kind of a centre-right publication, wouldn't it? In the United States, the Hill that covers American politics, and the Wall Street Journal. Now, they're reporting that there's photos of Trump gone missing in these files. So when the mainstream goes down that conspiracy path, you've no way of rescuing the situation. You've no way of getting that back. This is going to be a blockbuster movie somewhere, sometime.
Which part of it? I mean, I think it's actually more. Yeah. I mean, it is incredible that there's not a prestige drama on Netflix.
They're probably making one. They have to be.
Yeah. Maybe one of those things where it's kind of, they change the names and a couple of the details purely as a political matter. Again, I said it's the dumbest thing that I can remember in my adult life. When she walked into that event at the White House on February 27th with those binders, I cannot imagine how she thought that was going to work. And we have seen, in the months since, how spectacularly that has failed. It's a political issue now that is not going away. And that's the thing. It is now a mainstream political issue that is not going away.
It's a mainstream conspiracy theory. Now, it's not confined to the corners of Reddit or Twitter or, Facebook anymore. It's a conspiracy theory that's gone mainstream in the same vein of who shot JFK. I think it's the same kind of
I think that's
mainstream conspiracy theory, So, hopefully, we've had no highlights this year apart from myself and Vince starting the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say that is the big highlight for me personally. And I want to say on that front, I want to say thanks to you for doing this with me, Vince, and all the listeners. We have listeners in over 15 countries now. We've had a lot of people joining us. Really exciting, a thrill, a lot of fun so far. And we're going to have some fun next year too, right?
We've got loads of stuff coming in the new year. We're going to get into the weeds of the Epstein files. We're probably going to have to lawyer up there before that goes out. We're going to have a look at sport. We're going to look at sport, how I think American football.
Ahead of the American Super Bowl. I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be fun.
I mean, American football. We'll talk about hurling. We're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about issues that affect Ireland and America on a daily basis. We're doing something new that hasn't been done in the Irish or American podcast scene, and we're going to give different perspectives from different sides of the Atlantic. So I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.